Walker. I will call this special meeting of the Grand County Commission on redistricting to order. The time is 4:04. Present are Tricia Dean, Gabriel Wojtek, Kevin Walker, Sarah Stock, Mary McGann, Jacques Hadler, Quinn Hall. And I'm assuming, is that your phone, Mallory? Oh, Mallory Nassau, and then there's a phone. Okay, Kevin, you want to take over?
Sure. So just to give background, for the past, I think, couple of months now, we've had a portal open where members of the public and commissioners and anyone who wants to can submit maps, and we've got
in-person meetings.
I don't know, 15 by now. And we set a goal in a recent meeting of deciding, trying to decide by early December, and if we get delayed to our second meeting in December, we're still getting it done by the end of the year. So I think the task for this meeting and the next meeting is to just discuss the criteria that we want to use for selecting a map, take input from members of the public, and try to maybe narrow it down to, I don't know whether they call them finalists or semi-finalists or whatever, but maybe get our several, but a smaller collection of maps that we want to look at more closely. So my idea is that we could be pretty loose in this meeting about public comment and participation, but I don't see a whole lot of members of the public here. I know Carter Pape, I believe, wants to talk about a map that he submitted and might have other comments. And then there's a phone number, the 720-9775. Is that Mallory or is that someone else? I don't know. Okay,
that's me.
Okay, just checking. So does that sound good to people?
Yes,
Okay.
sounds good to me.
Okay. So, I mean, I think we've had, I think most of the people here right now have probably thought about redistricting basics for quite a while. So maybe I won't spend too much time on that unless there's desire. Let me briefly share just some criteria I thought we might look at once we get to individual maps. And simple ifs, but population balance, that's very basic. It gets talked about a lot. Our current maps are very far from population balance. Respecting neighborhood boundaries and not arbitrarily splitting neighborhoods apart. That's something that comes up a bit. I should say, I don't think any of these are like absolute requirements, and the map we choose is probably going to do better on some of these and worse than others. There's communities of interest other than neighborhoods. This could be income or housing status, other things. So that's something else we might think about. There's the partisan balance of maps that's been mentioned quite a bit over the past few years. We don't want maps that give one side or the other a undue advantage. And finally, compactness, or one might call this ease of description. It's pretty easy, given the mapping tools that we have, to draw maps that have very squiggly boundaries and kind of hard to understand. And so I think, other things being equal, certainly it's nice to have simple boundaries, though sometimes if you're trying to accomplish some other purpose, you have to make the boundaries a bit squigglier, so that all these things need to be balanced. So does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to this list? Okay. So yeah, so maybe I'll stop there, and and so in a moment, I think we'll start looking at maps, and people might want to save their comments when looking at a particular map. But is there anything else people have to say just about redistricting in general.
Maybe this would come up naturally in the conversation, but I would say maybe this is sort of a question to anyone, but like what sort of challenges or what sorts of things are we looking to repair or fix as opposed to how they're currently drawn?
They're not balanced as far as population right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also have a District 3 that isn't contiguous. It's composed of two disjoint pieces. That's, you know, in rare cases that has been allowed by courts. For example, there are cities where the city limits fall into multiple pieces, and sometimes a voting district will follow those city boundaries, but generally it's frowned upon because, you know, if you started making districts made of lots of disjointed pieces, it will get pretty crazy. But as Mary said, I think just the lack of population balance is a big one. But also I think those districts, we've had them since 1993 or two. I think there were existing local school board district boundaries. You know, I think it's better to have a rational process in deciding what we need.
So I brought these back.
Okay, well, maybe we should jump in and start looking at some maps. So I will share my screen again.
Trish, is she in the waiting room?
Okay, does everybody see the Grand County portal with pink and green and blue stuff on it? Okay, so this is, so for members of the public, this is the county redistricting website. Here's the URL. And if you scroll to the bottom, there's a list of all the maps that have been submitted so far. I think we're up to 3 pages of them. So we can start going through these. So the ones that have been submitted so far, the very oldest ones are using 2019 population data. And those aren't convenient to use, so I'm going to ignore those unless someone thinks that we should take a much closer look. And then, yeah, so I think these maps, starting with this one on 916, that's using the current population data. A lot of these are examples that I put in, just drawing districts at the bottom of the top. I was trying to get a wide variety of them. A lot of these maps I made, I'm not particularly fond of. But, and then a few weeks ago, I suggested all the commissioners to try to draw at least one map, just so that what the trade-offs are when doing it. And various people, and also Quinn, took up that challenge. And then we've got a couple of maps, a couple of recent maps by Carter Pape, which I'm assuming he's going to talk about at some point. But he also, if you click on one of these, you'll see a link to a long document about them. Oops. So maybe I'm not sure what order to do these in. Maybe I'll start with some of my earliest attempts, which have various shortcomings, and we can look at those, and then we'll look at some other maps that I think do a better job than I did. So yeah, let's take this one. So the population balance is not bad. Some of the maps do better than this. Maybe a few of them do worse. Like many maps, most of the county outside of Spanish Valley is all in one district. And then if we zoom in on On Spanish Valley, in drawing this map, I just sort of started South Spanish Valley, moved north until we hit the goal population, and then went to another district, this yellow one, and then split up the remaining things. Anyone should jump in here if they like. So, if I were to talk about pros and cons of this map, this boundary between the yellow and blue is kind of crazy. I think one can do better than that. It splits Spanish Valley south of the city limits on a rough east, splits it between north and south regions rather than east and west, which is what a lot of the other maps do. Here we're using the highway as a boundary, which seems pretty reasonable. No thought went into other communities of interest in making this map. It was really just population balance and compactness. So I don't know. So this is an example of a map that I don't think has any special virtues.
I like the fact everybody, that it's together. That we don't have any split districts. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, that people of interest are in Spanish Valley, especially in the more rural sections.
Yeah. So I do think one virtue of this map, which was semi-accidental, about 45% of Grand County lives in unincorporated Grand County. That's 45% of registered voters. And so those are the people that are subject to our planning and zoning. And we've had situations in the past where planning commissioners and county commissioners, most of whom live within city limits, are making all the P&Z decisions for people who live outside city limits, and it's been a bit unbalanced. So I've often in the past that one virtue of having districts rather than everything at large is we can guarantee that at least some commissioners live outside of city limits. And here indeed, this blue district is entirely an unincorporated Grand County, and almost all of this yellow district. Well, I guess city limits recently went into this USU area, but no one lives here now. But this Holyoke neighborhood in areas around Spanish Valley Drive and Murphy Lane. So this is approximately giving us 2 out of 3 districts which are unincorporated Grand County, which is a virtue, I think. Something I think is wrong with this map that's wrong with most of them, and it's just the nature of the census blocks that we have, is if we look closely along the boundary here, this is 200 North. And notice that people on the north side of the street at 200 North are being grouped with, are being separated people on the south side of the street. And it might make sense to draw the boundary right here where I'm moving the cursor. But this tool doesn't give us the option to do that. And so certainly I think one thing we could do is use this tool to create a map by putting census blocks together, but then say the actual districts are going to make some adjustments. For example, move this line from the middle of the street to the halfway between 200 North and 300 North or something. On the other hand, here we've got a boundary along 400 North. That's a busy street. This probably does make sense as a boundary. And so I think those, as we get, as we zero in on our final map, we might want to be thinking about issues like that. So let me jump to the map, which I think wins the prize for the cleanest boundaries, which is something that Sarah did. And then after that, I'm going to invite Carter to talk about his map since he's here. Okay, so again, most of the county in one district. This, in the previous map I showed you, Castle Valley and Thompson, et cetera, were grouped with the northern part of the valley. Okay. This one groups them with the eastern part of Spanish Valley. So the stuff around Murphy Lane is in the same district as Castle Valley. And that's also our current situation. Our current District 4 puts this area, this area and Castle Valley together.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
I did that intentionally because my thought was that the rest of Spanish Valley has the potential to be commercial zones, more commercial. I don't know. I thought that they had similar, like Castle Valley and like the edge of Spanish Valley probably had similar, like there's not commercial potential there and people like it that way. And it's very rural feeling.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else you want to say about the map before I?
Oh, you can go ahead. I mean, I titled it contiguous neighborhoods because I was trying to group neighborhoods that had similar, were similar together.
Yeah, and I think you succeeded a little bit better than I did or a lot of other people did in doing that. So some of the boundaries, we have Highway 191. That's a pretty reasonable boundary. 500 West, Cane Creek Boulevard. This 200 North area again. There's this issue that we might want to try to move the boundary up a little bit. Cut the census block into 2 pieces. 300 East, and again another fairly natural boundary in a busier street. The only split neighborhood I see is this Holyoke area. And Holyoke, this is a big neighborhood. It's got a lot of people in it, so it's I think we find that it often gets split. One could imagine adding. There are probably ways to do that, and if we like this map, we might want to consider variants that try to keep this whole neighborhood together by making adjustments elsewhere.
I spent a lot of time trying to do that, and it's hard because that area is so dense. And also, one downfall with this map, perhaps, is that the biggest district is the Spanish Valley district, where that also has the greatest potential for population growth, I think, in the near future. So I could see this, as this map stands, this district kind of like gaining more people than the other districts, but I don't know if that's true. It just seems like it probably is.
Yeah, well, one thing that comes to mind, right now the blue has the smallest population and the pink has the largest. One could expand the pink area here, making pink too big, but then go to say South Spanish Valley and take this area, add it to the blue to bring pink in the balance, and then adjust this boundary to even it up. So kind of a 3-way swap between the green, the blue, and the pink.
Could you bring out the tan into the pink to line up? Because that would, because that's the area that has the smallest population. So if you took some of the pink and instead of putting it with the green, put it with this part that's on the west side.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That would you could almost I could see where you could almost do it, be interesting. That might make it, because I agree with you. I think the growth is going to be in Spanish Valley. That's where the high density overlays are really happening.
Yeah, in particular, Arroyo Crossing, that's
is right there. So I don't think that should be our largest population area right now because it's going to grow in population.
Yep.
But I like this map a lot.
Something else, if we are thinking about population, the census blocks tell us census population, but that can be very different from registered voting age population or eligible voters or other measures. So I would say even if you manage to get districts that had the population balanced within like 2%, I would predict that when you convert that into registered voters, you're going to have deviations as large as 25%. And there's really just no way around that. I think it's unsettled legally. Almost everybody uses census population to redistrict, though some states are agitating to use other population measures. But I think everybody else in Utah does it that way. But we should just I think the upshot is we shouldn't get too hung up on making the census population really close to zero, because that's just one of many population measures, and the others are going to be nowhere close. So before we, since Carter is here and he also submitted a map, maybe I will invite him to talk about it, and I could either share my screen or
I'm ready to. Yeah, I've got mine up to share.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and so once you share yours, and
okay, I'll probably have to request. Oh, actually, it looks like it's gonna work. Okay. Oh, I got to change a setting real quick. Oh. To make this work, I gotta quit Zoom and then reopen it. So give me a couple seconds.
okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe we'll look at one more map in the interim. Let's see. Let's look at Gabriels Map.
I tried, they were awful.
So this one came into the last minute. So this one, like many others, puts most of the county in one district. Here.
Yeah, I don't know if I succeed. Like the population balance definitely is. I don't know if that's out of sort of, that's too imbalanced. I guess we would have to work on that. But one of the things I think that I drew up that might be a little bit different than some of the others that are similar. Courtney Kaiser submitted one that was pretty similar to mine, but I guess there's this blue, which I consider to be kind of like a historic or established commercial kind of area, and then sort of a near Spanish Valley and a far Spanish Valley. That's more or less the idea here.
Okay, yeah, I think the population is I would feel nervous if we were to approve this map as is. You often hear plus or minus 5% or 10% maximum deviation between largest and smallest as a standard. And I did some reading this weekend, and it's actually looser than that. So that's rather than being some kind of hard requirement where you're going to get in big trouble if you have a deviation of 11% rather than 10%. I think what the Supreme Court cases say is that if you're under that, either 5 or 10% threshold, depending on how you measure it, then the burden of proof is very heavily on someone who challenges your map. So like, if we were to be taken to court because our population balance wasn't good enough and we were within 10%, I think courts would say, we would probably win the case very easily. If we're beyond that, we can still have population that's beyond that, but we have to sort of give a good reason for it. So the burden, in some sense, the burden shifts to us rather than the person challenging the map. So I think within 10% is not hard to achieve, and people seem to care about that, and we should do it. It's not a strict legal requirement. Anything else to say, Gabe, before we go back to Carter?
No, I think we're ready for Carter. Yeah, that's good.
You can always come back.
All right. So,
and Carter, is this your version 3 or 1.2 map?
This is 3. So, yep. Yeah, I want to look more closely at Sarah's, but I think I like hers better than I like mine. So mine, yeah, I ran into the same issue with Holyoke. I kind of, wrote up why I think it's a difficult thing one reason is that it's so large. It's 600 people, according to the census measures. But then, you know, Holyoke also, at least to me, kind of seems like a natural thing to be grouping with, not like the southern end of Spanish Valley, but kind of this middle part. And the middle part is, you talked about, Kevin, the census blocks. They kind of divide neighborhoods in an unfortunate way. So one example is this this vertical line right here. So you see 104 people in this block, 67 in this block. If you go to Google Maps, you can see that this line, same line, and it's dividing Cayenta Drive, people on the upper end of it from people at the lower end of it. So, you know, that maybe, I don't live there. I don't know whether that's a big deal if they were split into separate districts, but, you know, a consideration. And then, you know, another example is, let's see, this line right here. This follows a road. And so you're getting people in a rural neighborhood on one side of the road in a different district from people on the other side of the road. So, but I feel like Saras Map, as I said, sort of does a really good job following boundaries that, you know, if they divide neighborhoods, it's like along a major road. One difference that I saw that I'd be interested to get you guys' perspective on it. So when I was making my maps, I tried to group the residents in this neighborhood, which is I'm blanking on the street name, Mavita Drive.
Deansville, I believe it's kind of what we might call that.
Okay, yeah. My inclination was to group them with people on the other side of 500 West, in the Bird Avenue, in this neighborhood right here, because you know, I mean, 500 West is a major road, and you know, at some point you got to split people up, even if they live near each other. But I felt like, you know, I did a lot of walking and driving through different neighborhoods just to kind of get feels for all of them. I felt like they were, I don't know, I felt like they were pretty well connected. And so I felt like a more natural divider was 400 North. It's not as major a road, but in a sort of like subjective way, I guess, it felt like you were not dividing a neighborhood to the same extent. Anyway, let me do more of a higher overview though. So the way that I started this was just by, you know, first there are about 600 people who live out here in Grand County, you know, Castle Valley, Thompson Springs. This block is somehow populated, and that kind of amazes me. But so I put all those people into the same group because I felt like that was kind of a natural. If you want people with similar interests to be, you know, represented by a single representative, it seems natural to try to put everybody in the really remote parts of Grand County into one district, and that's necessary also. Well, there are not enough people living outside the Mohawk Valley for them to get their own district. So you also have to choose people within the valley to group them with. And so I felt like, you know, maybe Southern Spanish Valley was a natural choice for that. And it seems like based on the maps that I've seen, most of you would agree with that.
Carter, could I inject a comment there on that issue?
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you just said makes sense, and a lot of the maps, you know, reflect that idea as well. On the other hand, being on the commission, the person, the current District 4, which is playing that role, and I don't know if Tricia wants to speak up here, but it tends to be a big burden. Like, you're responsible for, most of your district, maybe 75% is in Spanish Valley, but you've got a substantial number of people in Casa Valley. And then places like Thompson, despite its small population, can kind of take up a lot of time. And so I think some of the maps try to break up the county, I think for the reason of breaking up the workload on commissioners that are responsible for doing this. So I think both of those arguments have the, to me, it's kind of a tie between those two arguments, but just wanted to throw that in there while we're on the topic.
Yes, no, I mean, that's a good point. There was one that I saw, I think that, Tricia would probably have the best perspective on it, and, probably Greg Halliday as well would be someone useful to talk to about that. Yeah, that's definitely a worthwhile consideration. Okay, so that's kind of that's the big rural district, puts in most of the southern Spanish Valley. Oh, one thing is this block. So I'm gonna go over to Google Maps real quick, just to show you what that is. So that's right above the golf course. And what's happening with the dividing line there is you're getting, the way the map is as it stands is it puts these residences on the inside of this loop, Rio Verde and Reno Roja, set in a separate district from their neighbors across the street. And like, this is clearly a distinct neighborhood. So that's far from ideal. But the reality is this census block is just like kind of big. And it includes people from this neighborhood, but it also includes people on Juniper Drive, which is, a little bit of a drive away. So this, I think, is sort of, if it comes to it and the commission is, having to figure out where to draw the boundary for what's considered Southern Spanish Valley, in the time that I've spent looking at it, one option could be to, divide up this this census block. And the way that would look is, I don't know if the green line is visible enough. I can make it.
I can see the green line. Yeah.
You can see it? Okay. So yeah, this just follows the property boundaries that sort of define where this neighborhood is, and then connects back to the census block boundary up here. That keeps these households at the end of Westwater Road with the others who are on Westwater Road, but it puts Juniper Drive and Cane Lane Circle separately. So, this is another example of like, if you live right near this district boundary, you would probably look at this and be like, why is like literally my backyard the district boundary? If you care, but at some point you got to draw a boundary somewhere. This might not be the best place, but it's one option. So that is the rural district. The other, and this might be a more important feature of this map, is District 2. So what I was trying to do is be really intentional about grouping low-income neighborhoods into this district. So most of the low-income, well, actually, I don't know exactly the population division, but there are 3 or 4 apartments right along Cane Creek here, as most of you probably know, that are low income. And by that, I mean, like, they're literally like HUD projects, basically. Doug is getting in. So I wanted to make sure that those apartments were grouped with other, low income apartments like it. The Virginian Hotel being another example. I think that's in this block. Walnut Lane, which is in this block, I believe, and then the Map Senior Housing, which is up here. think there might have been another, but I'm not recalling exactly where. It's in the big long document. So
Where's Grand Oasis? I'm trying to locate.
Grand Oasis is over here.
Because that's another area where you have a lot of low income.
Yes, yeah. I'd be, you all probably know more about it than me. I mean, when I go and look at HUD's website to see like where are the, you know, the areas that have like, you know, agreements with HUD for, you know, having income restricted housing. I've not seen Grand Oasis on there, but it's a manufactured home neighborhood. I mean, like, I think these are definitely like, it's definitely a neighborhood that I think is going to be lower income than other parts of Greene County. So that's a good point, Mary.
Do you know where most of our Hispanic people throughout the county, or are they is there a district? Do you see an area where our Hispanic population tends? I know a lot of them live in Grand Oasis.
Good question. So let me do that for this map real quick. So again, I don't know if you are well able to see this, but the percentage here in this middle column is the percentage that is non-white. And most of them in this map, 31% of District 2, the yellow one, is non-white, and then District 4, this other one, is also 30%. To your question about race, so I a few weeks ago put in this map that was the explicit intent was, okay, I want to try to put as many non-white people into one district as possible, just because, you know, I wrote about why that's important to do. There's a, you know, kind of standard for districting that if you are able to create a minority majority district, you should, because it, you know, empowers those communities and has a positive effect in that way. So I tried to do that with us. The outcome was basically, it's really hard to put all of Grand County's racial and ethnic minorities into one district because they are interspersed throughout the valley. So with this map, I believe it's the blue one that has, yeah. So if you go to coalition, so I was able to get 46% of this district, which, as you can see, I mean, just like absolutely demolishes neighborhoods. So it's not, this is not a good map. Like this is for illustration purposes only. But this might get at your question a bit. So as you can see, Grand Oasis is one of those areas that has a very high Hispanic population. So that, you know, that's an important consideration. The census block with Walnut Lane, also another block that has a lot of the Hispanic population. And then as does, I think it's in here. No, it's not actually. So this is the block with, no, this is the block with the Cinema Court apartments. I was expecting that this would be less white than it is, but I think part of what's going on here is that this census block, which has the Cinema Court apartments, also has some houses in the Dragonfly Trail neighborhood, which I think are condos. So, you know, there's a lot of.
If I'm remembering correctly, I think there's also, it's hard for non-US citizens to get into Cinema Court. You have to, in contrast to, say, you know, Grand Oasis. Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And something else, I mean, in in looking at these things along racial line, one also needs to keep in mind about whether people are eligible to vote or not. One could draw a district that has a very high percentage of Hispanic, but not all of them would be eligible to vote, and so it wouldn't necessarily elect the representatives. So, like that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I think that this is also an interesting discussion, just thinking, are you trying to balance the voting age population or people who are eligible to vote versus the population as a whole? I think there's an argument there. I'm not fully bought in on either side of it, but I think there is an argument there about what happens when you sort of like pack a lot of non-eligible voters into one district, like what the effects of that can be. So for example, if you're only going by voting age population, children, for example, are not going to be counted in that. So if you have a neighborhood that's got a whole bunch of young families, the parents are not going to be able to vote. They'll be able to vote, but they won't get to vote on behalf of their child's interests with the same weight that they would if you were weighing by total population instead. And so you can extrapolate that a little bit. If you're in a neighborhood that's heavy in Hispanic population, heavy in undocumented immigrants, and you are trying to vote with their interests in mind, for example, your vote is not going to be as weighted the same as if it was everything by total population, regardless of eligibility to vote. But just another many discussion points. So, Mary, how does that answer your question about where most of the Hispanic population is?
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was with you. I thought that most of the Hispanic population tends to live in Grand Oasis and also in areas where, like you said, Kevin, many of them are undocumented and they can't get into the housing that is a lot of the housing.
So Carter, can you wrap it up in a few minutes so we can look at some other maps too, and we can come back to this.
No, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add. Districts 3 and 4, I tried to cater toward being, mostly people within city limits, some people just outside of it. And there's enough of the people like that you kind of need 2 districts for it. Something to note is that District 1, it's exclusively people who live outside of city limits. District 2 is exclusively people who live within it. District 4 is, again, mostly people who live in it. I think it's maybe like 95%, 90%, but there are the odd residents who live outside city limits. But then District 5, I believe, is also exclusively people who live outside of city limits. So these would sort of be your 2 districts, 1 and 5, where you're guaranteed to get a representative who lives outside of Moab city limits. Yeah, I think those are the high points. I mean, the keys to understanding this map and just kind of the thinking that was behind it are in that very long document, though only the first page is really the thing that you need to read. So yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Good, thanks, Carter. And for those of you, if you go on the website, there's a longer Google document that Carter links to on one of those pages, so you can read more there. Share my screen again. So, let's see. Does any, I'm just gonna skip around to what I think some of the more noteworthy maps are, but if someone wants to pay attention to a particular map, they should let me know.
I see Gwens.
Gwens, okay. Okay, so this one, like many others, puts all the outlying areas together with, actually, it looks like both Eastern and Western Spanish Valley, so that's a little bit different. So this would have kind of central Spanish Valley in one district, and then the eastern part and the western part in the same district that wraps around.
Yeah, I really was just kind of going more for numbers than anything and just kind of trying to keep straight lines. I actually think I spent probably an hour on this, and then I got to where I felt really good about it. Then something else happened and I spun off and never got around to actually going back to it. But yeah, mostly it was just kind of a north to south kind of thing, and on the main roads, and I was trying to get the population deviation down as small as I could. I actually think Janice Smith made one that got it down lower than mine, and I saw some others that were lower than mine too. So anyway, I didn't put as much thought as Carter did into it, which I really appreciate. I thought his comments were quite relevant, actually.
Okay, well, again, just for practice, because I think every map's going to be a mixture of, dividing lines that make sense and dividing lines that are suboptimal. And I think Carter highlighted some of the issues with his map, but every map has similar issues, so we have to put up with some of it. We've got 191 as a dividing line here, which is, I think, pretty defensible. And then up in the eastern flank, it looks like Murphy Lane is a dividing line.
Yeah, and I actually didn't love that, but again, I was trying to shoot for numbers more than anything.
And we do have this line here, which is Pat Creek, which I think is the more natural dividing line in Spanish Valley. I think Saras Map made use of that one, so that's something else to keep in mind. Yeah, I don't know. I probably shouldn't go through and nitpick at your map. So anything else on this one before we look at some others?
Thank you, Gwen, for doing this.
Yeah, you bet.
You guys did a lot better than I did.
So let me look at it. Sarah had another map, which this might be the first one we look at that puts the outlying parts of the county in different areas. I think otherwise I think in Spanish Valley, it's somewhat similar to the other map she had. So this has Casa Valley, Thompson is a different thing that we might want to consider moving this line and get all of Thompson instead of just part of it. And then this, we've got a few people living near Green River. The populations here and here are very small, so they're not going to really affect population balance very much. So again, this one, I guess the split in the Holyoke neighborhood looks a little bit different. So the red zone takes in a little bit more. This blue-green area looks similar. Yeah, so I think in Spanish Valley, it tends to do things fairly similar. And then I actually made a copy of that map and tweaked it a little bit. Let's see, yeah, so here's something very similar. Take Sarah's map as a starting point. So just for cosmetic purposes, I kind of made this green neck a little bit wider. It doesn't really matter. These census blocks have 0 population, so you can put them wherever you like without affecting population balance. Maybe that's the only change I made. And I think that also had the effect of getting the population balance lower. So this is to within 1.4%, which is among the lowest we've seen. But again, I emphasize that as long as that's below 5, we probably shouldn't worry about it too much. But maybe one takeaway from this is that as we go forward looking at maps, I think we should keep in mind that we can tweak maps to make marginal improvements. So if you see a map of someone that you like, but it has some flaw you don't like, you can make another map try to fix the flaw.
So Kevin, can we split census blocks? Or is
Yeah,
that okay?
yeah, we're the tool. I mean, we can't use this tool to split census blocks, but one could say, for example, here, let's see, that we want to use these districts, except that we want to take all the houses on the north side of 200 North and add them to the blue-green district rather than the yellow-green district. So that the line is here rather than there. And I think that's a good idea. I think Carter discussed something similar near the golf course where the census block boundaries in the middle of the streets, but it really makes sense to use property boundaries behind so that on a residential street, both sides of the street are in the same district. So
yeah, on this map, I wonder if we did that, it would add, I don't know, 75 people to green or something.
yeah, it would throw off the population balance a little bit, but since this one is starting out with a very small population deviation, we can afford to move from that and still know that we're good enough.
And you guys do also, Kevin, I would weigh in that from an administration standpoint, that actually makes it easier to administer the election because everyone that lives on a street is in the same district. That's it just for us as far as memory goes, and we can say, oh yeah, I know that street's the boundary and that whole street is in District 1 and the street to the north. That makes it way easier to administer the election or to keep it in your head at least while the election is going on, which districts people are in. And yeah, anytime you can keep both sides of the street in the same district, that makes that easier. So, and Fifth West is like a natural split. That doesn't matter really, a big street like that. But yeah, like if you had Nob Hill and South half was in one district and North half was in a different district, it adds a little bit of complexity to the administration. Not a ton, but it helps.
Yeah, and I think not just for people in your office, but also just for, I've probably had feels like hundreds of conversations over the past 6 years with people saying, well, what district do I live in and where was District 5? And if that's hard to understand. And certainly this isn't the only consideration. I think there's many important considerations in drawing districts, and simple, easy, some boundaries are one, but it doesn't trump everything else. So we should be open to boundaries that are less simple, but I think other things being equal, simple boundaries are great.
To speak to Carter's point about the neighborhoods around 500 West, up in whatever, the uranium zone. Yeah, Steensville. I think it's okay to leave those 500 North being the dividing line, just because if you move south of 400 North towards Swanee City Park, there's a whole bunch of neighborhoods that are comparable, like all around HMK. I mean, this whole zone is densely populated with similar kinds of residents.
I live over there, and I totally agree with Sarah. I feel more attached to the neighborhoods across 400 North and Steenville. I live kind of in the Parks area, and to downtown than I do to some of the neighborhoods on the west side of 500 West.
Okay, so it sounds like here's 400 North.
Could I ask a clarifying question, Kevin?
Sure.
So just say it again, Jacques.
I think what Jacques was saying is, so we're talking about lines of division in this area, which has a lot of people, so it's got to be divided somehow.
Right.
It seems like the two major options are using 400 North and putting these two areas together. I hope people can see my cursor, or using 500 West and grouping these two areas together. And Jacques is speaking in favor of this one.
Right. And I live right on 400 North. I'm in the 5th district. Oh yeah, right there. I live exactly right there where the cursor is. And I feel more attached to the neighborhood across 400 North to me, as well as the Parks area, than I do to the neighborhoods to the west of 500 West for sure. That seems like more of a natural neighborhood grouping to me.
Okay, so as a person living on the south side of 400 North, you feel more connected to the neighborhoods on the other side of 400 North than neighborhoods on the other side of 500 West.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's why I want to clarify. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's look at some other maps.
I can't remember what should I.
Something else, another point I wanted to bring up that just occurred to me. Is there any advantage to adhering or trying to adhere at all to our historic districts? I know they're out of whack, but using them as something of a baseline.
We would only be able to use a small fraction of them because the population balance is so far out of whack. But
Right.
yes, I would say that's a pretty, personally, I think that's a pretty minor concern.
Right. And I was just thinking of that from the standpoint of certain neighborhoods are, I guess, kind of used to being in the same districts and might, yeah, I don't know, historically.
Yeah, so I guess currently, what's the dividing line up there? I don't have it memorized.
It's 400 North is my dividing line. So yeah, the people across the street they're in Evans district over.
Okay, so that's a reason against what you said earlier.
It is. Yeah, I was just bringing the point up.
Okay. So here's an example of, I think this here in drawing this map, I was, trying to make sure that unincorporated Spanish Valley kind of was its own district so that we would be guaranteed to get a couple of commissioners who live in unincorporated Grant County. So it basically, in contrast to a lot of the other maps, which end up splitting Holyoke, here I started with Holyoke and then just worked my way south. And it's like using Spanish Valley Drive as the dividing line for most of it, though, I guess, and then switching to the highway down there. And then this part of Spanish Valley, which is frequently grouped with Castle Valley, just became its own thing. In order to get the population large enough, it had to go up into the Peachtree, Hecla, Power Dam area, pick up a few extra people. Then we've got, some districts here, something that's not good about this map, we could probably fix by hand, is that people, I don't know that, down the middle of Rose Tree is a good place to draw a boundary. You might want to draw it on the property line and in the backyard instead, and ditto for these streets out here. I think people on both sides of Hillside should probably be in that neighborhood, not grouped with people all the way over here. But again, with the census blocks the way they are, it's not possible to use the tool. This one does keep these together, but for the sake of population balance, it ended up throwing a piece here. So instead of using the more natural flag from the west, we could move that at the expense of making, maybe I could move it right now. Let's see if I can. Okay, so watch the population balance. Oh yeah, so it goes, so now it's, quite large, which was the reason for keeping it the way it was.
Kevin, could you give that chunk north of Rose Tree, that large chunk of green, to the teal color?
Sure, I can give that a try. North of, so this one, okay, teal.
Right.
Good name for that color. Yeah, I mean, it's still a little high, but not horrible. And then I guess we could also change that one. So this is maybe just a little mini lesson on fine tuning the district maps. Yeah, so one could continue to play around like that. Anyway, didn't want to spend too long on this, but just to mention some other ideas. And I think in this map, more thought went into these two Spanish Valley districts than dividing up these Moab districts.
And I do think Sarah's point that we keep the Spanish Valley, if we have to be off balance at all with the population, have that be the smaller population group, because it's going to change more in 10 years.
Yeah, I think that as well. And we've also got historical precedent right now, because our current districts, which presumably started out with roughly equal population, districts 3 and 4 have almost twice the population of the smaller ones, 30 years after they were initially drawn. And districts 3 and 4 are exactly the ones that overlap Spanish Valley. So what's happened over the last 30 years is we've had more rapid population growth in Spanish Valley than we've had in other places. And so these districts that overlap Spanish Valley grew pretty fast. And so I think we can, as Mary says, try to anticipate it this time. And it would be nice if the Spanish Valley districts maybe had population a little bit on the low side in the expectation of what they're going to do. Okay, Courtney Kaiser is sending a map. Let's look at that. So here's her explanation. And I think she was thinking more about rural-urban divide issues. So let's try to keep the rural vote combined. And then looking at the map in more detail. So here, Spanish Valley, unincorporated Spanish Valley is divided into northern and southern parts rather than eastern and western parts.
And then it has the house.
Southern part gets grouped with the outlying areas of the county, which is mainly Castle Valley. That includes a few people in Thompson as well. And then we have this nearer Spanish Valley district. So this in some ways is similar to Carter's map. I think he also mentioned Whitney's as being similar. She did manage to keep the Holyoke neighborhood more together. This teal district is a little crazy. Again, and some of that we can maybe fix by hand. Again, the census blocks sometimes force us to try to draw more jagged lines. We've got a district that's the Tusher area and downtown Moab and here. So this, that seems like a natural, these groupings, at least the main part of population, seem fairly natural to me. I don't know, so yet another idea. So maybe at this point, now that we've looked at a lot of maps and we have kind of an idea of what we're dealing with, we could take a short break and talk about procedure. So one idea is we could think about this, and then in the commission meeting tomorrow, have kind of a shorter discussion, just saying, here are the maps that we want to carry forward to the next level. Like I think, like I would say, the map that Carter talked about should go to the next round. Saras Maps should go to the next round, and a few others. And we could have that discussion tomorrow, after we've had a chance to think about things and maybe explore the maps on our own today. Does that sound good to people?
So you want to now decide which maps we want to move forward? Is that what you're suggesting?
We'll make the final decision about what to move forward tomorrow in the commission meeting. We've got an agenda item for this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying we could, another alternative is we could have some straw polls right now. I also think we should keep in mind, I would not be surprised if there's some late submissions, because now that we're actually getting moving with this, I think a lot of people who care about districts but haven't managed to submit a map so far might want to do so, and I think we should be open for that, open to that. So we might get some late entries as well, but I guess one question is, do we want to try to narrow the field in this meeting, or do we want to wait till tomorrow? And I was suggesting tomorrow.
I don't have a strong feeling either way.
I think it'd be fine to narrow the field to give folks some maps to look at specifically and maybe try to tweak. We could nominate them. I like the small tweak you made to the rural zones divided map. And I think we might be able to work on that map to get Holyoke neighborhood to stick together a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I would definitely like to take both of the maps that you drew and try to see if we can fix the split in Holyoke, at the expense of drawing the dividing line in Spanish Valley, at a different place. So those are definitely things that I'd like to explore.
Yeah, I'd be fine with deciding tonight or at least nominating tonight.
Okay, well, maybe we can make a tentative decision now and then we'll ratify it tomorrow in case people have second thoughts or something like that. So let's see what maps we haven't talked about yet. Okay, we looked at Gabe's, we looked at one of Carter's maps. He's got another one that people should probably take a look at. We looked at this one, we looked at this one. These two are similar, so I'm not going to talk about that one separately. I've drawn, you know, a lot of different maps that are on here, and I don't feel the need to talk about all of them. We just looked at Courtney's. This isn't a district map; it's more Carter just demonstrating how many people live outside. So that here's Sarah's original map with zones divided. So we looked at that and something similar to it. We looked at Gwens. Actually, maybe in close to doing all of them.
I think that is important.
Okay, so continuing to go back. Let's have a look at Trisha's map.
Oh, Trish says she's really struggling with her connection and had to turn off the video to hear the meeting, but she does think it's really important to divide those rural areas, specifically that Castle Valley needs to be lumped with East Spanish Valley and then Thompson with Western Spanish Valley if possible.
Well, so she likes the idea of not having Thompson and Castle Valley in the same district because that puts a heavy workload on commissioners. Is that?
Yep. And then just for the record, I'll read her other text or chat, which says, I also appreciate Carter's effort where we are attempting to acknowledge neighborhoods and race.
Okay. So zooming in on Trisha's map, it looks like we've got a Western Spanish Valley district here. You know, small quibble is, you know, probably this blue area where my cursor is now, that's like, that should be lumped in with the red. It's a small number of houses, but you know, you wouldn't want to split the Roberts neighborhood into two different pieces like that. We've got a dividing line in Spanish Valley that's a combination of Spanish Valley Drive and Pack Creek, which then it goes up, looks like it goes up to Murphy, but you know, somewhat reasonable. This one does have, you know, contrary to what Tricia just recommended, this does put Castle Valley and Thompson all together with Western Spanish Valley. Here we've got something that's looks like Holyoke plus Mountain View plus this area on the south side of town. Then we have these central streets and grouping we've seen before, maybe in Courtney's map. And then here we are using 400 north rather than 500 west as a dividing line. So move on unless there are comments. Yeah, but part of the utilities looking at these is just to get an idea what the space of possibilities is.
And Trish did just put in the chat that she was just messing around with her map. So not
Okay,
to.
yeah, so maybe Trish will submit a modified version.
She also put in the chat that it isn't so much the workload, it's more so citizens with similar needs and a voice as far as her recommendation about Thompson and Castle Valley, I believe.
Okay, well maybe we can discuss that more tomorrow when she's able to just talk live. Okay, demo map that we should not use. We talked about this one. This is Sarah's map that doesn't split the outside parts of the county. This is a map that Carter drew. Just, I think the point was showing that it's hard to draw the majority minority districts.
Just for demonstration purposes.
Yeah, that's Carter. And I think the other examples are all maps that I've drawn, you know, starting in various places. I'll just look at one, but again, I'm not, you know, you definitely should not assume that I approve of like all the maps that I've submitted here. I think it's it'd be better to guess the opposite. So this one, it does put Castle Valley in a different place from Thompson and Green River. It groups all of South Spanish Valley with Castle Valley. Oops, I guess I should have put in district. Yeah, so I guess Spanish Valley is being divided up in a way that's a little bit different than some of the other maps we saw. The Holyoke neighborhood together with kind of northern Murphy Lane and Highlands area. This downtown Moab area gets grouped with Tusher, etc. This one uses, rather than 500 west, this is the one that uses 400 north as a dividing line. This going across the street, I mean, this is kind of very far from ideal, having, this area squiggling around like that. So I would, in the unlikely event that someone's interested in this map, I would probably want to try to fix some of those problems. Okay, so I think that's every map except for a few that I drew. So maybe do you want to just have a tentative discussion about which ones we would like to kind of move forward and look at tweaking or keep in consideration?
Kevin, is there one of your maps in particular that you'd care to nominate or that you think might be especially well done?
Yeah, so let me just start by, here are the maps that I think should move forward. Oh, Gabe submitted a map as we were speaking. Wow. So I think the map that Carter presented, we should continue, leave in the running and continue to discuss. And some people, including Carter, might want to make some tweaks to it. I think, so here's my variant of Sarah's map, which Sarah said she liked. So, this one and or Sarah's original, I think should stay in the running.
That one has the fix and Thompson, so
Oh,
I think it should be that one.
okay. This one, of the maps I've drawn, I kind of like this one a little bit better. This second, thing that basically starts at the Holyoke neighborhood and works south. Let's see, and I think Sarah's contiguous neighborhoods map is one that I would like to stay in consideration, and I can think of, I actually started with a modification of it earlier today, but I didn't submit it. So those are the ones that I, personally am most interested in. So what are there maps that either people object, maps that I just listed people object to, or additional maps that people think should be moved forward? And I think we can keep several in the right, if we've got 10 maps, that I don't think that's too many.
I like the ones you pointed out, Kevin. Move those forward. That's how many did we say? The continuous neighbor, the large mixed race was just an experiment.
Yeah, this is more.
Yeah, so we want to put the other one at Carter's. I think Courtney should go forward.
Okay, so we'll add Courtney's to the list. I think that brings it up to 5 maps, maybe 6.
Yeah, I think
Not counting variations.
Let's stop there.
5 or 6 seems like a great number to me too. And then obviously we can make tweaks to a map that we decide on.
And I do think we should be open to some. I think there are. I would like just before this meeting started, I got some text messages from Curtis Wells expressing interest and asking how he might submit a map, and so I think we should be open to that as well. So I think these tentative finalists would just that pool might grow a bit, and I think that's fine, because
I think if we go over it tomorrow and talk kind of like we did tonight, just a brief summary of what the maps gifts are and what their handicaps are, and then tell people that it's not too late to submit.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to so we
Yeah.
want to decide on the schedule for soliciting additional public input. I would. Any ideas on that?
Well, I just, we're right now, we've got a second workshop scheduled in November to talk just about maps. And then we've also got our first meeting in December where we could potentially make a decision unless we feel like, there's, we need to, make the process take a little bit longer. I do think we should bend over backwards to make it everything open and fair. So that's why we built in the extra time.
We have to have it done, turned into the state by the end of the year, correct?
Quinn, do you know the actual deadline?
I'm not sure on the actual deadline. I mean, I've always heard the end of the year, but I can check and make sure there's not an actual formal date.
Yeah, but I think, people are going to be like filing for candidacy.
Yeah, we need to have it done so that, because technically the filing period opens right at the beginning of January there. So technically someone could file.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just consider the end of the year to be a hard deadline for. us
But
making
I
a
would like
decision.
to know before tomorrow, and I don't know how hard it will any of these maps eliminate one of our commissioners or take them out of a district?
Yeah, I haven't looked at that yet. But
I don't know how important that is, but it would make a difference in when they'd have to run.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's what I was thinking of too, is how it would change the election cycle as well.
Yeah, so yeah, that is an important issue that we haven't talked about as much. So if you look at how other states handle this issue, there's actually quite a bit of variety. And maybe two extremes are California and Florida. So they're geographically extreme, but also the way they handle, sort of staggered terms and redistricting. So what Florida does is it gives all its state senators, once every 10 years, they get a 2-year term so that right after redistricting, everybody's up for election. No one's,
Wow.
So there's no 4-year terms that are kind of overlapping and they kind of stagger it in a way, in a various ways. So that's one extreme. And what California does is just, if you got elected to a 4-year term and your district changes out from under you, you just serve out your term. And then, so the sort of is, in some sense, the new districts are phased in more gradually as people's terms expire. What Utah state tends to do is they tend to play it by year. So each year they just look at how many, sitting senators or representatives end up in the same district, or how many districts end up without a sitting representative. And they just make up some rule to try to deal with it. So there's some particular, there's no fixed guidance. I think we get to make up how we're going to do it.
Okay, so then we would decide that and not the state of Utah, I guess.
That's right. I think we can decide how we're going to deal with that.
It'd be nice to know at some point, like which map would cause, where people wouldn't be moved out of their district.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that, and I haven't done that yet, but I could try to do so before the next meeting. But I think one way of handling the transition is just to say that everybody serves out their term, and we just have to decide, because I think that our new districts are going to look nothing like the old ones, because the old ones are so far out of population balance, and we'll just have to pick, I guess, either 2 or 3 districts. I guess next year would probably be 2 that are going to be up for election in 2022. And then, people running in that election will be someone living in that district. And yeah, and I guess if it happens that is one of a sitting representative who's currently serving a 4-year term, we could try to avoid that, or we could just kind of change someone's 4-year term to a 2-year term, make them run again. I don't know. So, but I guess one thing I am advocating for is that we not be super fussy about it. And that there might be some districts which, for a brief period, don't have any commissioner in them during the transition, or which briefly have two. So.
Okay. So we've selected the finalists. Have we decided on the schedule for soliciting additional public input? We're going to just decide that tomorrow.
Yeah, I think, we've scheduled the second November workshop. And I think we should tell people we're going to make a decision in our first meeting in December. And so the opportunities for public input are the commission meeting tomorrow. They can write to the commission anytime. We'll have another workshop. I think it's November 30th. And then we've got the first meeting in December. So those are all opportunities for public input. And then we've got the option of postponing the decision for 2 weeks to make it in our second meeting in December, if for some reason we don't want to make a decision in early December.
Kevin, does the consultant help out with the final decision making at all, or do they pretty much just provide the website and the software?
They provided the website and the software, but actually that reminds me of something that I should have shown you. So I'm going to share my screen again. So we also have we didn't look at all the maps, because if you go to the top of the page and look at draft, they're grouped separately in the draft plans. You've got some maps that were drawn entirely by computer. Because we asked the consultant to do this, and they can generate as many of the, I told them 6 would be enough, but if we wanted 1,000 of these, we could certainly have it. It would be pretty confusing. So let's just, look at computer plan number 1. So these are drawn with a computer, attempting to make things compact, though it doesn't do as good a job as humans do, and to keep the population balanced. I think I said within 3%. And otherwise it's just kind of random. And as you can see, the boundaries get a little squiggly. So I don't think any of these computer plans we'd want to use as is. Some people might want to start with the computer plan, but part of the reason we did it is, in past discussions about partisan bias, you might just want to see what the maps drawn, by a non-human, not taking partisan issues into account at all look like. So we've got 6 examples here, and if anybody wants more, it's pretty easy to generate them. But to answer Jock's original question, no, the consultants, they're not helping us make a decision. They're just helping us discuss maps. I think if we had like legal technical questions, I think they are pretty, because they work on districting in so many different places and often at the state level, they might be able to answer that, but that's it.
Okay. When is our next meeting in November? I want to make sure I have it on my calendar.
Let me double check. But I believe it is November 30th at 6 p.m. Let me.
Yeah, I don't have it. November 30th at 6 p.m.
But I'm clicking on the. Yes, November 30th, 6 p.m. It has been noticed. Well, I feel like we're done. Maybe I'll turn it back over to Mary.
I think we've reached the end of our agenda. So if we don't have any objections, we will close this meeting.
Okay.
I think it's very productive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was super helpful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.